This is an interview with Aleksa Gordić. Aleksa used to work at Microsoft and DeepMind as a research engineer in machine learning and has now started his own work with Ortus, a Google Chrome extension to use on YouTube to answer all your questions about specific videos. It's super cool and using large language models. Aleksa has lots of experience in contributing to the AI field, but also building his own stuff. He also has the YouTube channel AI Epiphany that I am sure you are familiar with, and if not, you should definitely check it out. I hope you enjoy this interview. You are already managing a lot with YouTube and Ortus and just everything. Are you still planning to do videos, or are you like going all in with Ortus, the company, and this project?
I am planning on doing the videos still. The frequency is obviously reduced just because I don't have that much bandwidth, but I am actually planning to have every 2 weeks at least something. Maybe it's going to be a bit more about the entrepreneurial story rather than like hardcore ML. Who knows? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'll get back to papers as well. It's all TBD. Currently, I'm just focused on building a startup. That's kind of the number one priority. But I'm not going to give up on the YouTube thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard to manage everything. I don't know how you did with DeepMind and Microsoft to have a YouTube channel as well. Just with the Ph.D, like my schedule is it's not free, but it's like I decide of my own schedule. So it's much easier to try to balance everything, but still it's quite hard to try to do videos as well as doing the thesis and everything. So I can't imagine with a real job.
I think it's similar. Like you still have a bunch of flexibility. When you're working for a good company, ultimately what matters is your output. Like nobody's like tracking you and sitting down, oh, you didn't do like 8.5 hours today or whatnot. Like if you can do cool stuff and cool work in 5-6 hours, you're good. And then next time you can maybe compensate, or like ultimately the output is what matters, not the hours. And I hope that's how many companies operate, right? Like ultimately, you're not paying for people to spend their time because they're going to find a way to fill in the gaps and just do something else and not be productive. So yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately for most of my friends, I think like they go in person and they have to work 8 hours per day, no matter what. So it's definitely better if you can just have like a specific workload, and if you are more efficient, well, you just do it faster and you can do more other things. That's definitely the ideal solution. And how was your work at DeepMind? What were you doing? Like, I assume DeepMind is more like researchy. So were you more focused on the implementation of research or writing papers, code, manage people? What were you doing there?
It actually very much depends on which team are you in. Basically, I was in applied team. So that means I was working more on the inference side of things. Initially, when I just joined, I was basically collaborating with the folks from the Flamingo team, so the vision language models. I did help integrate some data sets there, so you can consider that part of my job more researchy. Like ultimately, all of these bigger projects are now like boiling down to hardcore engineering. Like it depends how you define research, right? Like I would argue that all of these large language model projects, VLM projects, are more like engineering efforts than research projects. Obviously, a new paper comes out, somebody picks up an idea like flash attention or something. Well, that's again more of an engineering breakthrough, right? Like flash attention was just optimizing how the attention mechanism works and made it more efficient. And so like I think that mindset of always trying to see what's going on in the field and staying at the edge and reading the papers and picking up ideas, even when those ideas are much more engineering ideas than research ideas, I think that's what we can call as researchy nowadays, at least on those types of projects. So I was basically, as I said, I've done that, and then I maybe helped review the Flamingo paper as well. For that, I got the small, like in the appendix or something, like grateful to Aleksa Gordić or whatnot, because I joined the project was already kind of wrapping down, and so like I was not there from the beginning, and because of that, I couldn't be the co-author. Yeah. And so after that, like I was mostly focusing over the last maybe 6-7 months, I was focusing on getting vision language models into production in various Google products. So that means I was mostly on the inference side, running those big models like up to 80 billion, as you know, in the paper. That's kind of public information. obviously wouldn't share anything that's not public. And I was running those on like clusters of TPUs. And now the thing is, most of those things, when you're at Google and these big tech companies, like all of these toolings are internal. And so a lot of the things and complexity is kind of abstracted away from you. So I didn't really have the gut feeling for what's going on at all times. And also some of the core people on Flamingo project, I talked with them and I basically asked them some things like, hey, do you understand how this sharding thing works? And they were like, nope, somebody else implemented that. I'm just focusing on this other part of the abstraction. So ultimately, when you're in these bigger projects, you kind of narrow down, niche down in one particular sub area, and you don't necessarily see the bigger picture unless you are maybe the team lead or whatnot. So I think coming into DeepMind, I definitely had different expectations, what it means to be on some project. But again, that was very subjective because if you were on some smaller project where the output is a paper, then the experience would be completely different. And honestly, I didn't have that experience. So,
and you are more of a generalist, right? You prefer to touch a bit everything and do everything, or like manage everything at least.
100%. Like I like to have a bigger picture, and that's part of the reason why I never saw myself long term in a big tech. Like you're always going to be. Like, I think it's over glorified. I think most people have not that great of experience, to be honest, because imagine how many products are there in production, running at Google, running at Microsoft. Somebody has to patch the bugs. Somebody has to make those systems run. And that's not the most exciting job in the world. But again, it just depends. Like some people who are passionate about certain part of the stack and they end up doing that role and they are into optimization and maybe like then for them it's a perfect fit. But I think on average, I think most people are probably not as super happy as if you were to start something on your own. But then again, that requires a completely different spirit. You have to be more entrepreneurial. It's not for everyone. So just a personal preference, I guess.
And would you say that it's also the same reason for why you dropped out of your master's, from what I've seen, and also did not do a PhD? Because from what I see, from what I know, the studies, the more you advance and the more like specific you become and the less generalist you can be. For my master's, I could say that I was working in computer vision and classification, like that's pretty general. And then for the PhD, I'm now doing medical imaging and segmentation. And it's already like much more not fine-tuned, but like much more specific. Like basically my question is, why did you drop out of the master's?
Okay, maybe first to just address the whole PhD thing. I think, well, in my experience talking with many people who've done PhD, it varies a lot. Some people like immediately over the first couple of months start digging into a certain niche. Yeah. Some people spend 2, 3, 4 years trying to find their thing, and then they end up publishing maybe one paper. So, for example, one guy I just recently talked with is literally in that class. Like over the first 3 years, he was very broad and didn't niche down, even though it's a PhD. So I think PhD is also a spectrum. It's not one thing that's kind of uniform across all of the universities. But back to your question on the masters, why I dropped out is because I couldn't bear it. Like it was not meant for, like I was not built to sit down in a classroom and listen to generic classes without any agency. Like I felt that, okay, I know what I want to accomplish. And at that point, I already switched and decided I want to switch to software engineering from electronics. So I knew I had to go more through algorithms, data structures, more software design. And the masters were very broad, and still I knew that's not going to be the fastest path to get where I want to be. And also, like, what's the chance? What's the probability of your teachers at your faculty being the best experts in the world for the particular area you care about? That's more of a PhD thing, if you're lucky, right? If you get the right advisor. So like, I'm not dismissing, like, in some alternative life, I might have taken the PhD route, but the master's part, I would skip it again. Like, I just don't think that master's is very useful, and many people do skip it. They just go directly to PhD. So yeah, like just because the way how I learn and the level of agency I have and the level of like self-discipline, I don't need this external structure to give me the motivation. And in every other respect, I think is just inefficient. You can do a much better job if you're self-disciplined, if you can curate your own, personalize your own curriculum for yourself. There is no way that the generic curriculum is going to cut it for you. So because of that, for me, it was a fairly easy decision, to be honest.
But sometimes for big companies like Microsoft, for example, you need the credentials and just the title, basically. And you just mentioned that you did it, you learned by yourself. But how did you manage to end up at a big company like Microsoft as a software engineer in machine learning without any official degree in this field?
Yeah, so the story is, I guess, back in 2017, I was doing this Android internship in Germany. And I reached out to my friend who was who was great at like doing, he's done previously many software engineering internships at Facebook, Google, all of the things. Now the acronym is kind of different, but you get the point. And he told me to basically go through this cracking the coding interview book. And so once I got back from that internship in Germany to Belgrade, I just doubled down on just learning algorithms as much as possible, going to hackathons, going to datatons, going to all of these competitive programming websites, and trying to just execute on all of those resources I knew are good, like the cracking the coding interview. And then I started applying. I got rejections. Like, I think wherever I applied, the first time I was always rejected. It's almost like always. And I think it's fairly common as well. And for some reason, just because of lack of communication, I think most people think that all of these stellar engineers and people just first time you apply and you're there. So I think that experience is probably romanticized a little bit as well. And so after having done all of those preparations, I ended up in this machine learning summer camp, for which I found out completely accidentally. Like I think that the deadline was like in 3 days, and I found out from someone, hey, there's this ML summer camp, check it out. And I was like, okay, let me see what it's about. And I immediately applied. And then later, because the people who were organizing that camp were from Microsoft, that helped me land the job at Microsoft initially as a software engineer. I was applying also in parallel for Microsoft. So those two combined kind of led me to land the job there. And so I joined Microsoft, and I joined the Microsoft HoloLens team, I was super lucky. Like, in retrospect, joining that team was the best thing that could have happened. That was the best team, I would say, at Microsoft at that point of time, probably even now. Or maybe now like working with OpenAI or like closer to OpenAI, that's probably the most exciting thing to be working at Microsoft. But back then, HoloLens, like super like science fiction device, like if you saw the Apple Vision Pro, like HoloLens 2 could do most of those things in 2018. Probably not the same level of quality, but you already had instinctual interactions. You could already use your hands for gestures. You could look at holograms, and the system knows that you're watching that hologram because we're tracking your eye gaze vector. And I was actually working on the eye tracking myself. And so long story short, amazing project, a lot of computer vision. Obviously, it's very computer vision heavy. And because of that, you had to use the machine learning, right? Like the best way we know how to parse images nowadays is just machine learning. And so that naturally led me to have to learn more about it. And then I started learning on the side, like Andrew Ng and reading papers. And then, yeah, that's a whole different story. But that's kind of how it started.
So it was always about being a software engineer, and then you ended up in machine learning as it was the main solution for the issue. You didn't enter the field because you wanted to do machine learning.
I did, because I entered the summer camp because I was interested in artificial intelligence. But like software engineering was also a transient role for me, right? Because I was by my bachelor was electronics heavy. I was focusing on digital electronics. I was even designing some high radio frequency electronic circuits, like on such a painful level of details. I was literally drawing the metal layouts and the polysilicon layout of how a certain up converter radio circuit should look like. All like there, and then microcontrollers and embedded software and real-time operating systems. So my background, like the official background, comes from really, really deep hardware space. And then I was slowly kind of raising up the levels of abstraction, all the way to applicative layer of software, and then ultimately to machine learning, which is, as Scarpati called it, software 2.0, which is even more like abstract and on a high level compared to what the folks below us are doing, the compiler folks, the embedded software folks. So yeah.
Before that summer camp, and And Microsoft, you mentioned that you enter basically a lot of competitions and try to get various practical experience. If someone is just tired of college or dropping out or finishing university and not wanting to do a master's and PhD just like you, how would you recommend them to get into AI in 2023? Would you say that the best thing would be to go to Kaggle or to other competitions website, or how would you recommend them to be able to finally end up at like DeepMind or OpenAI?
It all depends what the ultimate role is. Do you want to be a software? You can be a software engineer at DeepMind. You can be HR at DeepMind. So like it all depends what you want to do, right? Like if you want to be a research engineer, which is something I'm the most familiar with, I can probably give the best tips there. But I also know how to go the other routes as well. Like if you want to be a research scientist, et cetera, et cetera. So you mentioned Kaggle. I think Kaggle is a separate community. If you go the Kaggle route, you're probably going more the data science route, and you probably will not be dealing with unstructured data as much, meaning text, meaning vision, meaning videos, more of like tabular data. Although I'm aware that Kaggle hosts like a slew of competition, but I think historically they've been more like I know Boyan Tungus is the kind of one of the Kaggle grandmasters, and he's always XGBoost. You can just tell by the models they're using that they're very focused on tabular data. Whereas I think everything exciting that's been happening in the field over the last many years has been more on the unstructured data front. So images, vision, all of that. So how to get to the role you want, basically, again, depends first on the role, and then there are some meta things you should do no matter which of these roles you want. Whether you want a machine learning engineering role or scientist role, you want to have some decent background in mathematics. And I wrote a whole blog on this topic, by the way. So like there's no way I'm gonna tell them as much as I like can right now. So I do encourage them to check it out. But do as many projects as possible. Maybe try and reconstruct a couple of papers. Initially start with some of those high-level courses like Fast AI. I think is probably the best one right now. Even more than Andrew Ng. Like Andrew Ng just gets the name. He's a Stanford guy, professor. He's very like big credentials. And like Jeremy, who also has amazing credentials, is just in that sense he's not like as prominent using like he doesn't have the Stanford badge. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. But like I think that his courses are probably even better for many people, especially those who are coming from software engineering roles. He literally has the course that's meant for software engineers to transition into ML. So that would be probably one of the first things I would do. And then immediately just start building. And of course, these advices are more for engineering roles. But like start building, either reconstruct the paper, but even that is probably unnecessary. You probably want to just get familiar with also prompting, using the APIs, and then so that's kind of the top level of abstraction, and then you can slowly start going deeper into reconstructing papers. That's kind of on the bottom layer of this abstraction pyramid. I'm kind of using bad terminology, but you know what I mean. So that's some advice there. For scientists, it will be different. So for scientists, you would probably want to go the PhD route. You want to focus on reading and implementing papers as much as possible, getting familiar with the literature, everything that it takes to become a true expert in a very, very niche domain.
For example, if we take the research example, and the person is doing a PhD, how can you be sure that you will be able to end up doing research at DeepMind if you are doing a PhD? Like lots of people are doing PhDs and want to end up there. So how can you get in front of the competition or just build a better background?
That's a good point. I completely agree that just by going the standard route, even if that route is PhD, it is a fairly standard route, especially over the previous years. Maybe now people are a bit more reluctant with everything that's been going on to go the PhD route, because it's becoming increasingly, maybe it's a bad word, but irrelevant for, I think, increasing percentage of the tasks you'll be doing eventually. So you want to find some way to stand out. And there is like a spectrum of ways you could do that. Like one of them would be create one open source repository that people find useful, people at DeepMind, people at OpenAI, and just show that you're extremely good at this topic by doing that. That's one way. Second way is write a blog where, again, you attack some previously unattacked problem, or just take some existing problem but have a completely new perspective, and be sure to write a very high quality blog. And if people notice you, that's again one credential. I think a single good blog post can get you that role, or at least opportunity to apply for those companies, because ultimately you will have to prepare to go through the interviews. So that's the second way. And then for me personally, like YouTube definitely helped, because I was covering very heavy papers, and I had people way before I joined, I had many DeepMinders commenting and saying, "You've explained this better than I could." And for me, that was like such a huge recognition, because here am I, like somebody who has zero background in all of these things, just like grinding and working and learning, and all of a sudden, like I'm getting there, like knowledge-wise, and also getting those credentials. Also, if there is an open source project from your target company, go and contribute. That's a perfect way to get noticed. Maybe a small tangent: George Hotz recently started his Tiny Corp company, and he has this Tiny Grad framework. And the way he's basically recruiting people is by watching at the pull requests and finding high quality pull requests and basically interviewing those people. So I think that's the new way, and that's how I will be recruiting for my company as well. Especially when you're a startup, you have that luxury of getting much more information than just 4 or 5 hours of end-to-end interviews with someone that can be very easily tricked. So yeah.
And you have lots of choices when you want to contribute, or just to, for example, if you are doing a PhD or you have a full-time job, then if you want to excel or like be in front of the others, you basically need to do more than just the full-time job. So like contributing to GitHub repositories, or building something, or having a YouTube channel as you did. And I wanted to ask, why did you start explaining research papers on YouTube, or just sharing on YouTube, instead of directly building something or contributing to open source work? Like why for you was it the YouTube thing?
I've actually done all of those. I have a couple of very, very popular open source repositories. One of them is like Graph Attention Networks from Petar Veličković that had over 2,000 stars. So that's, back then, that was a huge number of stars. Like now you have all of these GPT projects that amass like tens of thousands of stars in a couple of days, but like this is kind of overhyped. But back then, that was a big deal, and people did notice all of the work I've done. And that was not the only one. I also implemented, from all of the subfields I was learning, be it reinforcement learning or natural language processing or computer vision or a bit more niche areas like neural style transfer or deep dream. I've implemented all of them from scratch, and that helped me learn how it works, and also get a bit of exposure, like get those public artifacts out there.
And would you say they were more useful than YouTube, or just different? Like what bring you the most opportunities?
So it's hard to estimate. Like ultimately, the person I got referral from was Petar Veličković, and I think already while I was covering his videos, his papers, like the Graph Attention Network paper, he did notice me, and we started chatting casually, and we are also compatriots. So we're coming from Serbia, both of us, and so that kind of connected us as well. And then later I also implemented the project. So he was very, very comfortable to refer me, just because he knew me personally as a human being, as well as like my technical expertise. And so that was kind of my way into getting the referral. And literally how it happened is, on Friday, he pinged the recruiter. The recruiter replied 30 minutes later, and he said, "Oh, of course, I follow Aleksa's work already, like over the past months." And I was like, "Oh my God, like DeepMind recruiters already know my work." And then literally on Monday, I had like a call, "Hey, let's start the interview process." And I didn't start preparing at all. So it was very funny to then the following weeks were very intense, to be very, that's kind of understatement of the century. And that was kind of how it happened for me.
And was it a problem to not have the master's or PhD degree to get into DeepMind? Was there anything you had to do to work around or something?
Nope, 100% not. Like as I said, for the research engineer role, you don't have to have a PhD. So if I was applying for research scientist, this depends on whether OpenAI or DeepMind or other companies. But like there are some companies, I think DeepMind is very strict about this. don't quote me on this, like it's not the official stance of DeepMind, but like to the best of my knowledge, for the scientist role, you have to officially have PhD. Even if you're better than 70% of PhD folks at DeepMind, which is hard. But even if you're there, if you don't have that official diploma, I think you would not officially become a scientist. So I think they're kind of rigid on that side. I think OpenAI is way more flexible, and they don't even distinguish between scientists and engineers. I think you're just like a member of technical staff. So that's kind of different. And all of the other companies, maybe Mosaic ML and others, all of them have probably specific and different requirements for what it takes. But like ultimately, the same thing I mentioned before on it doesn't matter how many hours you spend at your job. It shouldn't matter whether you went through the PhD route or master's route or if you just self-studied, because we have amazing examples. Like Chris Ola is a good example. He, I think, dropped out of bachelor. He's probably one of the best scientists in the world for interpretability, working at Anthropic as one of the founding engineers, to the best of my knowledge. That might not be his role, but I think he's a good example. There are other examples as well. I like to think I'm one of them as well. Maybe not on that level of expertise in any particular topic, but like more general and yeah.
Of course you are. I mean, and you at DeepMind, you worked mainly on Flamingo, you mentioned, like so visual language models and multimodal learning, which is definitely a trending topic, and everyone is applying it or doing that right now, just like you are with Ortus. The main reason you left DeepMind was probably because you were more attached to like something too specific, I assume. But would you you could have asked to change teams or do something, as you mentioned, that was about a paper or like more general towards a specific topic. So why did you end up leaving and doing your own thing rather than trying to explore anything else at DeepMind where you already were?
So the thing for me, before I even joined, I already had the clock ticking. I knew no matter how good it is, that I'm not going to stay for too long. It was already a bigger company. It's like DeepMind is not, I was surprised, by the way, I didn't know this, but like DeepMind is now 1,600 people, plus there was the recent merger with the Brain. So like, who knows how big it is? So it's not like a small startup environment. Like, so because of that, even before I joined, same for Microsoft. Like I knew ultimately that I'm too, maybe too high agency is a bad word because many of them are too high agency as well. But just like the entrepreneurial side of me is too strong for me to have somebody above me, like a manager who's going to tell me, hey, do this task, do that task or whatnot. And regarding the switching teams, I actually wanted to switch a team. And I was trying to switch a team that's actually building some of these larger scale models. That was my goal. But like it's a bigger company and it's not something that happens overnight. It's not that easy to actually switch teams, depending on where you are in the org. It was very painful and with a lot of frictions. So like that's it. And I was already at a year and a half almost, and I knew that even if I transition, like I would stay for too short, and like I don't know. So for me, this was the perfect moment. And then the day, like I think the day I left, basically on Monday, GPT-4 came out, and that was like a blast. I was okay. This is I'm living on the top of the hype in the AI space. Well, that's still to be seen. I think the field is still kind of going upwards, and I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon.
Would you say that the accessibility of those models to anyone able to build lots of incredible applications, is it more of a blessing that it is accessible, or it makes it so the competition is so high that it's even harder now?
Competition is always better for consumers and always not the best thing for those who are competing, right? Because it's kind of it's a race to the bottom, as they say. Like, I think what happened is we lost this gatekeeping capability in the ML field. And now if you're a software engineer or a web dev, you have a fairly good chance of competing with somebody who is like very proficient in machine learning, in my opinion, if you're trying to build a product, if you're not trying to just innovate on the model side. And that's empowering and annoying at the same time. You have people like, I think his name is Pietro Levels. I might be mispronouncing his name, but he's a very famous entrepreneur who's built multiple companies on his own, literally like a solopreneur guy. Like one guy, maybe a couple of people helping him a little bit. and he just like built these two companies called Avatar AI. I think he rebranded that one to Photo AI or something, and then the second one Interior AI. And both of those companies he took Stable Diffusion model, and this became so easy that somebody like him, who has like I would bet like almost zero, if not zero, machine learning knowledge or expertise, was able to fine tune Stable Diffusion and get like the pictures in front of people inside of a web app. And his current revenues are like, he's very public about this, by the way, like 100,000 every month. So the monthly recurring revenue is 100,000. That's for many VC-backed companies, startups, YC startups as well. That's they never achieved that. They failed before that. So here's a single guy with zero ML knowledge, all of a sudden building cool stuff in ML. So that's terrifying for those who are incumbents in the space and who thought that ML is their like defensible position. But it's also very empowering because that means anybody can build cool stuff now. And then, of course, if you have deep ML expertise, and I like to think I fall into that category, I think it's much better to position yourself a bit lower in the infrastructure like stack as opposed to be on the applicative layer. And that kind of leads me to the whole Ortus deal. And for me, that's mostly exploration. At this point, I'm just exploring and also just learning. Like I learned a ton because I had to build everything, the front end, the back end, the data pipelines. I'm currently in the process of wrapping up the monetization part. So I had to learn about how to deal with Paddle, with all of these webhooks, and there's so many things, and Google sign-ins. And so just from the technical standpoint, and also just like building the whole thing, I think it's very empowering. But ultimately, I honestly think that's probably not the best place where I should compete, because like here, when you're on this level of the stack, you want to be fast and you want to be familiar with web technologies. And that means that puts you in a pool with a lot of people, because there is a lot of very hardworking people who know web. And so that's not kind of perfect position. But if you go deeper down the stack, maybe the something that like Mosaic ML folks have done, I think that's amazing. Like if you have deep ML expertise, you can start something like Mosaic ML, where they're basically allowing you to train your own models at lower cost. You have bigger flexibility. Data stays on your side. You don't have to give your data away to like third-party APIs. No matter what their privacy policies are, there is still the level of trust you have to have. Whereas here, you just train on your side. So I think that's kind of a good position to be in right now if you have deep ML expertise, somewhere more deeper in the stack.
On your end, you had multimodal learning and vision language expertise, as well as lots of experience with YouTube. So I assume the Ortus choice is also a great choice for you, where you have expertise. But before entering into that, could you cover or explain what is Ortus? How does it work? What does it do?
Mm-hmm. So on a high level, what Ortus currently enables you is a Chrome extension. You open up a YouTube page and you watch video, and you can ask question about what happened in this video, and you get like an immediate reply, and you also get the precise timestamp of where that relevant answer is in the video. That's kind of maybe the gist, but there is also the summaries, there are like the episode level summaries, the chapter level summaries, and a bunch more features. But the main gist is you want to find information in O of 1 instead of in O of n. In sense, like when you're seeking some information, you usually have to go through the thumbnails and find details you care about. Here, I'm just going to ask and get immediate reply. Like, so it's in a way almost like a search engine, like although the scope of that search engine is a single video. And yeah, that's just kind of what it is on a high level.
It's funny because I feel like it's the same goal as the shorts feature, where we basically try to, for example, for a long podcast, we try to find the best bits of information and create short to reduce that search complexity. And so like you are basically doing that with just a text query instead of manually trying to find the best sequence, creating a short and sharing it. And so it's, I feel like it's really cool. It's a really good timing where podcasts are becoming bigger and bigger. Like everyone is doing one, and long form content is super popular. But what's not bad, but like the thing with long form content is that it's often not nearly edited. It's not edited nearly as much. And so you need to watch it and wait for the information to come. But most times it's just to relax and like enjoy the conversation anyways.
100%.
But
100%.
still, if you want to gather insights and stuff like that, it's definitely not like you don't have a good bang for your buck listening to podcasts. It's like way too long to have information. So it's a really good timing to build such tools. And have you seen
100%.
Have you seen lots of competition in that? Because I haven't, like I've seen some summaries obviously with like built with Whisper and stuff like that could make summaries of podcasts, but they aren't really amazing. But I have not seen things like Ortus where you could have chapter summary as well as asking question to it. That's pretty cool, and I think it's pretty novel. But on your end, since I'm sure you did the market study, so did you see anything interesting, and how did you end up doing better or trying to compete with them?
First of all, thanks for the compliment. I think what I've seen is there is a bunch of people who go on Twitter, create a project using LangChain for like 30-40 minutes, and then they say like, oh, I'm doing the same thing as you are doing. But like it couldn't be further from reality, because actually building something in production on a bigger scale that works better is so much harder than you just connecting like a transcript of a video and then using 3 lines of LangChain to query it by using maybe some one of the vector databases like Chroma or whatnot. So in that sense, there is a lot of competition, but I haven't seen any of them actually push it to make it useful to anyone on any serious scale or with any serious SLA. We're actually available. You can go use us and get some value, hopefully. So that's that. And then I did see some of the extensions who are doing similar things. ChatTube is definitely doing something super similar, if not the same at this point of time. But as I said, we're kind of evolving. So for me, this is more exploration than the end goal. And then I think this Cider extension is doing similar things, and not only they're not kind of constrained to video formats and YouTube in particular. They're for any blog or whatever you're doing, you can install them and have some type of summarization and question answering capability. So yeah, people are building some similar stuff, but I didn't see anyone who is super focused on just building this and accelerating.
Are you looking to add articles and things like that as well? Because I assume you are working with transcripts, so it should not technically difficult to add everything, but like in terms of the machine learning part, I assume it's pretty similar. So are you planning to add them?
Not really, because that would be now the spreading in a direction that I'm not really interested in. As I said, like I don't want to disclose too much right now, but like I'm thinking of some other things of where I think I can have defensibility as opposed to going and attacking just going broad. I think it's much better to either be in a particular vertical, like currently for us YouTube, and doing an amazingly good job at that, rather than spreading too thin across everything and getting a little bit of value across everything. I think it's better to have a bunch of value in a single thing. That's my thinking there. And if you want to go broad, for me personally, I want to go deeper down the stack, not stay on the applicative layer. So that's how I think about it.
How did your more technical and research machine learning background help you compared to Levels, for example, to build Ortus? Like, did it help you in any way, or you just had to learn everything and just use APIs and connect stuff? Like, how helpful was it?
Yeah, it definitely did help me to know machine learning, especially in particular large language models and understanding tokenization and tokenization issues, and thus you're better at prompting when you know some of those things, and also just the mindset of how you research and pick up stuff, and where do you find exciting ideas to try out in your system, and then like going through LangChain and immediately understanding everything they're doing easily, and so that's all of my previous background of understanding how ML works, the concepts, the terminology. So it was very easy for me to just pick up something and re-implement it on my side. When it comes to LangChain, I actually did create a whole custom logic of routing and bunch of things that I can't disclose because it's not open source. But and then later I kind of put names on some of those techniques I basically reinvented on my side just by going through LangChain and understanding, hey, they're calling this routing chains, or they're calling this, I don't know, whatever. And so yeah, it did help me. That's a TLDR. I also had to learn a bunch of new stuff, especially Chrome extension. Building a Chrome extension is super painful. Google went through this transition from the Manifest v2 to v3 version. 95% of the documentation online is completely obsolete and not working. It's actually very painful to build a Chrome extension. I didn't know that in advance. And also there are many peculiarities, like there is like this content script and there is this background script, and there is the option, and all of them have different access to different APIs. So sometimes you have to communicate from the content script, which is the thing you actually see on YouTube, the widget. It has to send some data to some background script that's running in the background in the browser, and then that script is communicating further information. And like there is just so many peculiarities and things I had to learn. Also, just the web design part, the web development, the backend part, like building a Nest.js framework on the backend. I had a luck over the first weeks. I actually had a friend of mine who was helping me out. I'm currently just solo in this with my girlfriend who is amazing at product design. She's a product designer by profession, and so she's helping me on that front as well as on various other ideation fronts. But yeah, it was a lot of learning, and machine learning did help.
Awesome. I had a question about like what was something that you didn't expect to be nearly as complex or difficult to do. So I assume the Chrome extension was definitely one that you underestimated. But is there something?
The top one thing? There is top one thing. Top one thing is Google sign-in. You would not believe me. Like Google sign-in was the most painful. It's supposed to be a single button that you click, you open a pop-up, you pick your email address, you sign in, and that's it. And you're all of a sudden you're using this so-called identity platform. It was so painful. Like again, the issue, the combination of using it instead of a Chrome extension added additional complexity. So you couldn't use some of the existing React libraries. So you had to use directly this Chrome API in combination with some other APIs, and it took me way longer than I thought. I thought it's gonna be like, how hard can it be? Every single website in Chrome extension in the world, okay, maybe Chrome extension is a bit less, are using that. It was so hard. Like, and so that was something I've done actually a week ago. So that was super painful. Other than that, let me think. Technically, well, building this payment processing pipeline was, I wouldn't say difficult in the same sense. It's more, you have to do this work. You have to figure out, read documentation and do stuff. Whereas with Google sign-in, it was literally every single code snippet I found online was broken. I had to go and fuse 5-6 different sources and get something to work. And I'm going to actually push that into prod on Monday. So it's going to be a bigger update. Monetization and Google sign-in are going to be now a part of the app. And so that's going to be fun.
And that's something that people on Twitter with LangChain definitely don't see or don't 100% tackle yet.
100%. You just see a Google sign. You just don't know the level of complexity that goes into making something work without issues, handling all of the exceptions, errors. When you're dealing with web, there is just so many things that could go wrong. You can have networking issues. You can have streaming issues. OpenAI might be, for example, in a like surge demand, and so you have to handle the errors there. So that it's a lot of engineering work that you never see as somebody who just has a widget in front of you and you're just dealing with asking questions. So it's a qualitatively different beast compared to just creating an MVP for a weekend and thinking that's the same thing.
Exactly. Is there something on the opposite side that you expected it to be hard but was much easier?
Not really. I think that as long as you put your mind onto something and you put your time and effort, and you give me enough time, I'm going to solve it. Like most of course, if it's blue sky research, there is an option that you will never get to the solution. Like obviously, AGI cannot be one of those tasks that I put in front of me. But like because of that, I don't think it's usually just sometimes you just have to grind through it and learn. I didn't have anything that was surprisingly difficult, to be honest.
Like you mentioned that you may not be the right person to do everything. Like for example, you may need someone that is an expert for front ends and for all the different parts. And so Are you already looking for other people to help you?
Yeah.
And also, so that's great if anyone is interested in helping you. Now you've built the whole foundation work, but having to start over, would you recommend someone to do as you did and try to do everything by themselves, or start right away with a small team of diverse backgrounds?
It all depends. I don't think of myself as this omnipotent creature that can do everything. Like, first of all, I'm time constrained. If I'm doing backend, that means I'm not doing ML. If I'm doing ML, that means I'm not doing the signing. If I'm doing monetization, that means I'm not doing the front end. So like, I can't do everything. So like, I super appreciate and value good teams, and I like working with people. So all of those combined make it very, very like apparent that I should hire and have people work with me. But by this very nature of me being general, like, I'm not the best at anything. So that means I can hire a front-end engineer who's going to be better than I am, even though I can probably pick it up in, I don't know, like 1.8% slower than that person who is like a professional or something. I actually became fairly efficient at this point, but like, I don't want to do it, if nothing else. So I want to have somebody who's better doing the front end. I want to have somebody who is better doing the back end. And then there's also the marketing, talking with VCs. Once we start raising money, that's a different beast. I was kind of so far rejecting the offers because I want to find my own conviction before I go there. But yeah, you definitely, if you can, find a couple of friends and start building with them. And that's how I started. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I hopefully didn't get that impression, but as I said, my girlfriend helped me from the get-go. Also, I had my ex-co-founder now, so he was the friend I mentioned. But because of personal circumstances, he couldn't continue because a bunch of stuff, financials, and he's currently working at a startup that he can't quit just like that. And so 100%. If you unless you're somebody who doesn't know how to work with people, but then you'll never be able to build a big company, in my opinion, including levels. I think one of the critiques I would give to him is, of course, everybody has their own goals, but like, in my opinion, he's not too ambitious, even in the sense, like, he is never going to try and just focus on one single thing and make it huge.
Yeah.
And also because he's very anti VC money, and he just doesn't appreciate the fact that can help you accelerate and build bigger teams, because everything he's built so far has been a bunch of companies that are where you need a couple of people to run them. And some of them are fairly successful, don't get me wrong. Like Nomad List is a fairly big website, but he's been working on that for 7 years on his own, maybe with a couple of people helping every now and then as contractors. So I think ultimately, if you want to scale and build something that's huge and has a massive global impact and leaves a dent in the history of civilization, I'm becoming like romanticizing this whole thing. But I think then you have to build bigger teams, you have to raise money. Most of the time, some people can be bootstrapped, but most of the time you have to accelerate, because if there is competition and they raise money, how are you going to outcompete them?
Yeah.
So that's the thing.
And you mentioned that you would replace yourself with experts in front end and all the specific areas. Like, you are a generalist, and I think I am so too. That's why I'm on YouTube as well and covering all the different papers. I just really love reading them and love learning about all the different things and touch to everything. You said it yourself, you would hire people that are better than you at specific things, so like specialists and experts. But when would you hire another generalist?
I think that's one of those dark magic thingies that's based on intuition. There is if there was a simple rule heuristic I could give you, then everybody would be building startups. I think I recently listened to some podcasts where they were calling the generalist folks cannons, and then everybody else is, I don't know, like cannonball or something. In the sense, you sometimes need people who are more natural leaders and general in scope. But like, when is the right moment is very too specific to every company and situation to know it. Obviously, you don't want to start, like, if you have a team of 6 people and everybody is generalist but not expert at anything, I don't think that's as good as having 6 people who have expertise in one thing but then general across everything else, like the T shape, the classic T shape. So I think that's probably better. You want to have people who complement you across different areas But everybody, because those are early days of the startup, and everybody will have to do everything. You want them to have the entrepreneurial spirit and generality, and not be just like a cog that you can put on a single part of a system, and then when everything else is burning, you cannot pull that person into just extinguishing the fires.
So you definitely need some specialty, but it's still pretty much required to be interested and learn about the other things, at least to work with people efficiently.
100%. You have to be willing to learn, because you will have to learn a ton. There is just, everything is unknown.
If we think of the mainstream researcher, like if we say Einstein or whatever, we would think that they are like so much far into their own research and their own thing that they cannot even communicate to other people what they are doing, since they are so experts in one thing, which I assume we need in some fields, but especially for the industry, this cannot work, or maybe it can work, but it's like it needs a good manager or something. I don't know if no. Would you say that someone that is like extremely good at something, doing a PhD in one very particular thing, super good, but has no interest in learning other thing and even working with people, can this person be successful just because this person is so good?
100%, but not in the entrepreneurial space. They are not going to build their own company. Well, Larry Page and Sergey Brin were arguably experts in a field, and they were not really good at anything else. So they early on hired Eric Schmidt to help them be the CEO and build a company. You can even succeed in the startup world, although you'll never probably be the CEO that the prototypical CEO is, I don't know, like Elon Musk or whatnot. But like, if you're working as an embedded, like, individual contributor, I think OpenAI and DeepMind is mostly consists of those people, right? They are extremely good at something. Well, they also have to know how to communicate, because ultimately, if you're a researcher, you have to know how to present your paper. But only that much and not more. You don't need any more. A good example would be this guy called, I think, Alex Graves was his name. He used to work at DeepMind. He is one of the co-authors of the neural Turing machine paper, the NTM paper, which was very, very interesting. And he was an IC, so that means individual contributor. He was not a manager. He didn't have anyone below him. And he was like level 8 at Google or something, which is like stupendously high in the like VP level or whatnot. And he had 0 people underneath him. So I think in some of those well-resourced labs, you can definitely be completely like, it's a derogatory word, but like fachidiot, they call it as well. Like, in the sense, you just know one thing, but you're so good at this one thing that you just compensate for the lack of generality. So there is space for everyone. It just depends how you position yourself and what's your goal.
And if you are just an average person, how would you succeed in the startup world, or just in the industry, if you cannot be the best? Like, there's always someone better than you, I assume. And so how can you still succeed if you cannot be the expert? Is the easier route to be more general, or should you still try to be like the best at something, even though you may not? Is there something you would say is more easier, or like has more chance of success?
And when you say success at building a company, that's a particular goal we're optimizing for, right?
Yeah, have a successful career, as in like more than average outcome, I'd say. Like, of course, so build a company is definitely good, or be like higher up in the Google or big company.
I mean, if you're average, then by definition you're going to probably be average in your outputs as well, unless you're super lucky, right? So you do have to stand out in one way or the other. Now, to your question of this spectrum between being broad and general versus being narrow and expert, like, it's a spectrum between, like, you can also make it a spectrum between DFS and BFS. Like, are you doing the depth first exploration or breadth first exploration? And I think there are plenty of examples across that spectrum of people who've succeeded at whatever the final goal is, be it building a startup. I mentioned Larry Page and Sergey Brin maybe being on the one end of the spectrum, maybe on the other end. I don't know who would be a good example of super general in tech. There's plenty. I think there are probably more general examples in the tech space than super narrow examples. And the same goes for career. If you're trying to accomplish, for engineers, 100%, there are people who've been like very general like myself who can make very nice progress in career. And you also have people who are obviously super narrowed down on maybe compilers or whatnot, and they become amazing engineers there. Maybe Chris Lautner would be a good example of somebody who's like very super good expert, or is it John Carmack? Like amazing expert, and still they succeed. So TLDR, it doesn't really matter. It depends on your personal preference where you end up on the spectrum. But like all of them, if you're putting in enough effort and if you're above average, then you have chances of getting there. Like I'm saying you have chances because it's not guaranteed, right? There is no guarantee. There is a factor of there is stochasticity in the system. So even if you're good, you might not succeed as somebody who's much worse than you. But you can definitely increase your luck. You can make your luck, as they say.
I definitely agree on what you said with the effort you put, and I disagree on what you said on you need to be above average. Well, I believe even if you are below average, if you put enough effort, you can definitely succeed much better than lots of average.
Sure, but then the definition, it depends on the definition. If you, that means you're above average across the dimension of much, you can put much more effort. So in that sense, you're not below average. If you're average, then by definition, you cannot become the best unless there is some luck factor. But like, I think that extreme effort is super underappreciated, especially like among intellectuals. I think that's probably one of the most defining traits that's kind of the best predictor for success anywhere across anything. Because if you're tenacious, if you can pull out, if you can work on something for 10 years in a focused way and put a lot of work into it, it doesn't matter if you're below average on whatever metric, intelligence or whatnot. I think you can compensate for many, many things. But if you have that extreme ability for that type of work, then you're definitely not average. There is no way you're average. Yeah. That's a super scarce trait to have. So in that sense,
obviously, if you are focused and you work more than the others, you will basically have more luck just because you have more opportunities. But it's funny how like back in the days when we are younger, or just when we are in school, the person that seems most intelligent or that we are like impressed the most is the person that studies the least, which is like it doesn't make sense. It feels like this person has talent by nature, but then they end up like not studying enough or not working enough, and they just sit on what they have by nature, which is definitely not the best way to tackle life.
But it also might be, again, overly romanticized. I think a lot of them, for example, you meet somebody in high school, and like they are not putting in the effort, or during your bachelor or whatnot, and they're not putting in the effort, yet they have these awesome grades. Well, you're forgetting that they had 12 years of education before they joined, at least, or whatever the country is, before that. And maybe they were like amazingly ambitious in high school and elementary school, and they were putting in more effort than the other kids. Yeah. And then you see, because we are not at the same stage, like, and it's very hard to calibrate for where we come from. And so I think there is a lot of confusion because of this, ultimately. Like, talent does exist. I'm not denying talent. Like, of course, somebody who is 2 meter plus tall, of course, they're going to be better at slam dunking than somebody who is 160. Like, talking about centimeters, I'm not sure whether you guys use the imperial system or, but yeah.
Yeah, obviously. I just want to come back before finishing the discussion. I just want to circle around to Ortus. And if you can disclose it, what is the next step for Ortus? You mentioned the big update that you are going to do, but what is the next step related to machine learning or to any understanding task or videos itself? Like, is there anything you can say about what you are tackling next?
I'm just going to say that I'm very passionate about training models and doing some deep tech work. And some of the issues I've seen building the Ortus gave me some inspiration to potentially start doing something additional. So yeah, that's as vague as I can get, but at least I'm saying that I'm going more deep tech side.
Awesome. I'm excited to see that. You mentioned you will stick with videos, and I know that you love videos and content creation in general. So how do you think AI will be changing videos and content creation over the next few years? Is there going to be a big difference, or will we stick with listening to podcasts and watching shorts on TikToks?
I think it's definitely changing, and we already see companies that are doing something along those areas. I think a good one would be, is it Descript? I think it's Descript. They're basically building this AI-first video editor software that allows you to do stuff like, for example, let's say the two of us, we make a mistake now while we are speaking. You can, in post-production, basically what they do is they automatically transcribe your speech, which is something you usually don't get with the classical video editors. And so what you can do is you can edit the textual part of your video, and all of a sudden they synthesize the voice using your voice. You just have to kind of, enroll beforehand with your voice, and then you can literally edit out stuff without having to refilm. Because historically we had to refilm, right? So if you wanted. I'm usually super lazy and don't have time, so I just kind of trim stuff down or edit out. But that's very empowering. That's one example of what people are doing. So I think both on the video editing side as well as on the stylization side, like we've seen what's going on with the images now. Like I think the most recent one was drag GAN, like the GAN that's allowing you to just drag points along the image and then thus edit the image. And I think that type of powerful editing capabilities is definitely coming for videos as well. It's just a matter of time, and that's definitely gonna change a lot of things.
Do you think video generated content will be there soon? We see a lot of generated images, but they aren't really used that much. I feel like, for example, if we see presentations or advertisements or anything, if they are used, it's because people wanted to use AI and they are saying that this is generated. I feel like they aren't really used because of their quality, and that's what they wanted. Do you think videos will get good in the next few years, or will it take like extremely long to have? When do you think we can use AI to create videos and start creating just content, like the most difficult kind of content with AI?
It's a difficult question. Like, I think a straightforward way would be to say we're in the same moment of time with videos where we were with DC GAN with images, like back in 2015, where things are not really looking great, but like that with a couple of years of effort and research and engineering, you will get there. Having said that, like videos are obviously so much more data intensive, like processing wise, you need much more flops. And I don't think the hardware is still there, especially not for 5-minute videos. Maybe if we're talking about shorts, like super short, like 5-second GIFs or 10-second or up to 30-second. I think that probably in the next year, 2-3 years, we'll see a lot of progress there. For longer form, like 5 minutes or more than that, I definitely think hardware needs to catch up as well. Like I think it's prohibitive from the cost economic standpoint. Although take everything I say with a grain of salt, I haven't been really following the latest and greatest papers from this particular subfield. Although I'm aware when something big comes out. So that because of that, I'm fairly sure. I'm fairly confident that my answers are roughly okay.
Right. We see a trend going to podcasts, and just for example, we like to go to shows and things that are really human first. And just like with podcasts, it's a lot of unedited audio content, and like that's how we want to spend our time. Just listen and enjoy the content, and like nothing has to be perfectly edited and perfect at all. We just want human discussions. So I wonder if trying like so hard to do video editing, like I see the use for Descript, for example, for correcting the audio and improving the content. But for like, do we really want something that generates content for people to consume, or will we just end up with generating informative content with AI and then using Ortus to summarize it for us and just like never consume content? Basically just use AIs to create it and AIs to to ingest it. Do you see a use for video generated content?
I mean, definitely, especially if you're a creative, if you're a designer, there is a lot of economical demand to produce such clips, right? So there is an industry for such things. I don't think it's mutually exclusive with longer form podcasts. I think those are going to probably remain for a foreseeable future in the human space, in the sense the shorter form videos will probably be more and more AI generated, especially if your goal is to create a personalized ad. That's whole purpose is to have higher conversion for whatever your business is. So there, I'm fairly sure it's probably much better to do something like that, video generated content, and it will probably become much better than humans as well, because you can just set an objective that you want to maximize your conversion rate, and you train your neural network using some RLHF or derivative or RLHF, some ideas for aligning to produce the most attractive type of short video. But for longer form, like humans, ultimately, we are the best at being humans. And I don't think that's going to change. Although I might stand corrected, who knows? Like, because ultimately neural networks are very good at mimicking humans, and whether imitation game is much different compared to what we already are, well, I think that debate is on since Turing times. But yeah, I do think there is space for both, and we will continue to coexist with the machines, with our AI overlords, as they say.
I also saw a study where for beauty, like for facial beauty, basically the most average you are, the more beautiful you are. Like if your eyes are centered perfectly, if your nose is placed perfectly. And so I feel like an AI is basically an average, like it represents the population. And so it might be able to mimic humans better than one individual can.
Interesting thing you said about the human face. You probably know about this website, like This Person Does Not Exist. I'm not sure if it's still in production, but when you try and generate human faces, they usually seem very beautiful. Like at least when you randomly generate like a woman face or whatnot. And when you now said that it's averaging, it kind of makes sense, right? Like all of those like kind of generic faces of beautiful women and men, and it makes sense. I mean, just the statistical nature of how these systems are trained.
But I assume it's also trained on like, I don't remember the name, but celebrities dataset, celebrity something. It's biased towards beauty. And yeah, I have one more question for you that is not related at all to everything we discussed. And it's related to something that you mentioned, that you always try to learn, and you try to be the most productive possible. You like you like sports, you like health and how to improve learning. And so I wonder if you have any recent discoveries or book you've read or anything that could help the listener to improve their life in any way, like either health or just learning efficiency. Or
I think I ingest most of my information nowadays through podcasts, to be honest. Maybe blogs as well, which are condensed versions. So I don't have any book recommendation per se. I would definitely recommend Andrew Huberman's podcast for anyone who wants to do these types of like life hacks, optimizations, sleep, nutrition, supplements, everything else. So for me, I think the main thing, again, it boils down to tenacity. Just create some plan, some structure in your day-to-day, and try and keep it up for many months or years. And like you will undoubtedly learn a ton along the way. You will tweak, you will evolve your curriculum, but you just have to start with like simplest of habits. Like every morning when I wake up, I'm going to drink a glass of water with like maybe one pill of omega-3 amino acids, and I'm gonna stick with that. And then after 3 months, that becomes kind of second nature. Or maybe you have like, for example, I do have alarms on my mobile phone that remind me to do some stuff. And then you can introduce the second thing, like maybe, okay, now every day or every second day or whatever the curriculum you create, I'm going to go out for a run for like 15, 20, 30 minutes. And I think everyone in the world, like no matter how busy you are, you have 15, 20, 30 minutes to do some physical workout, and everything else is just a copium. Like you're just lying to yourself, obviously. So that's just, and then you keep it up for like 3-6 months or whatnot. And then if you unroll into the future, if you start younger, like in 5-10 years, you'll have so many habits that you've grown over the years that people look at you like you're some type of a wunderkind, when in reality it was a painful, slow process that took years and years. And it's the same thing for me. Like I think when I was 12 years old, I'm 29 now since recently, like I started doing some of these types of curriculums, and that's like 17 years of me exploring and sticking, and I actually never stopped. My biggest break from a physical routine was maybe 3 weeks over the span of like 17 years. There was like the biggest break where I was not working out. And so then you just accumulate so much knowledge. It takes time.
Yeah. Have you read or listened to Atomic Habits?
Atomic Habits, I know about the book, and I think I'm probably applying everything they're saying there already, but I never read it. I might have watched like a video summary. That's what I usually love to do with those books. Like I really don't have time. There's too many books. You just go and watch like a 5-6 minute like a summary. And if I see that's roughly in the space of everything I already knew, I'm like, I don't have the time to read another book.
But the audio books are really amazing to me. Like it's just podcasts for me. I listen to them when training or running or biking or anything. And I feel like it's really, I prefer audiobooks than podcasts, but I also watch a lot of podcasts. And I think Atomic Habits is a really good one to create, to learn how to create habits as you described. Just one thing, for example, is like if you are trying to start being more active, like running, instead of trying to go to say to yourself that like I need to run twice a week for 30 minutes, instead just try to every day like put your shoes and go outside and just do that. Like if you don't feel like running, come back inside and that's all. But when you do that step, first it gets easier to put your shoes and just go for a run. But then once you are out, you often will be just like, okay, whatever, just I will start running. Like there's no way I will get back right now. And yeah, it's a good thing to just like diminish the first entry step for creating a habit. Like don't already aim for the ideal habit that you want to build. Just start slow and easy.
Yeah. And
another great thing that he mentions is when you want to create a habit, it's much easier to link an habit to another one. If we have your example of drinking a glass of water every day when you wake up, you can start doing that, and then you add your omega-3s, and then you add your whatever I have, like calcium or something else that I take in the beginning. But you don't have to start with the perfection. You can just start with something and then.
Great point, and this is something I've learned like naturally, like throughout my life, and that's one of my best habits. Like even if I have 15-20 minutes to spare, I will open up a paper or I will open up a podcast, and I will just like, I think this is probably not like the same for everyone, but I can super quickly get into the focus mode. I need 30 seconds. Like of course, it's a spectrum again. Like in 30 minutes, I'll maybe be in a deeper flow, but I can already. With 15 minutes, I'm going to use it up instead of waiting for the perfect time slot, for the perfect opportunity where I finally have 4 hours of free time. And then 4 hours comes and you're like, oh my God, that 4 hours looks intimidating. Like I'm not going to start. And most people just keep on procrastinating like that because, I never have the time. I'm working full time, etc., etc. And then weekend comes and then you just try and make yourself busy, which is just like mass procrastination, basically.
Yeah, I think for people like you and I that you and me that are doing, for example, when you were at Microsoft, you started a YouTube channel and did other stuff. But what's difficult then is that you have a full-time job, like you have an 8-hour occupation in your life, and you need to fill in the little 15-30 minutes with things that will actually produce something, which is something that like we are managing to do, but I believe is hard for many people just because, for example, if I take my girlfriend as an example, she often says like, I just have 20 minutes, I cannot do that, or like there's not enough time. And do you have any recommendation? Like, is that genetic? How can you go around that?
Yeah. It's, first of all, it's hard. It's definitely hard. It's downstream from mindset. And I know this is a cliche thing to say, but if you have this mindset of urgency, I personally, like, I feel the sense of urgency throughout my day, to be honest. And so if I'm not working, if I don't feel productive, it sucks. I don't feel good. And I don't feel like long-term, I will reap all of the benefits of like compounding interest of my time that I put in. So like, because of that urgency, I almost like, it's not panic, but like, it's almost like alertness starts rising in my body, and I have to go and do something. Like, I have to do something productive. Of course, I can always, I do know how to relax as well. And that's a skill you learn, because initially it's very easy once you become super productive to become overly productive. And then you're very close and sometimes you go into burnouts. And so you also want to know how to relax. And like, you have to know how to switch to make that switch from both modes. Most people are very good at just switching to just chill mode. But once you build the muscles to switch into the alert mode, then you have to additionally build the muscle for going from the alert mode back to the relaxed mode, if that makes sense. You have to have high pain tolerance. Like, sometimes it's literally physical pain. Like, you can feel like in your, like, solar plexus, I think is this part. Like, you can literally feel pain there from like, oh my God, I have to now do this. I would rather go outside or whatnot, or just like lay down on the bed or sleep. But you push through it. It's in that respect, I think it's very similar to physical workout. Like, of course, it's hard. Your muscles are burning. You would probably rather drop that bar from your shoulder down to the floor, but instead you keep on doing the squats or whatever you're doing. So I think I learned a lot about going through that, grinding it through my calisthenics and physical exercise, a routine that I've developed, as I said, since I was 12 years old or something like that. There is no magical pill. You have to push through it, and it gets easier with time. Definitely gets easier.
Yeah, it's all in the pain tolerance. I think the physical training definitely helps with everything. On my end, when I was in high school, I was just like gaming and not really studying. And then a few years into college, I started training, felt much better, and then I started trying a bit harder in school. And then I created the YouTube channel and everything. And I like,
nice.
It all started when I started training. Like, I think it's definitely necessary in anyone's life.
For many people, I think that might be the thing that gets the ball rolling. It's a prerequisite that you have energy, right? And usually the physical, that's the easiest part to tackle. If you have more physical energy, you will probably, but not necessarily, have more energy for mental work. I think that's, again, a different step. Most people never go from one to the other one. They don't learn how to channel the same type of energy into the intellectual endeavors. And so they just stay at something that's more physical. But yeah, 100% agree with what you said.
Yeah, it's just like feeling bad, or partly for depression. Like, when you are not physically active, you end up not being mentally active, which ends up like it's just a vicious circle. And if you get one thing right, it should help all the others. And also just
100%.
Just in general manifests itself in health. So I assume that's the same thing for just being physically in shape. It will make you mentally in shape as well, just like ready to tackle new challenges and just like try to think and brainstorm and whatever. It's really linked.
Just a quick remark. I definitely don't think it's a necessary condition, though. Like, I think there are plenty of examples of entrepreneurs who are chubby, definitely not in physical shape. Like, Reid Hoffman is probably a good example. The ex founder of LinkedIn. And then if you take a look at Elon Musk, he definitely does not look like somebody who takes super much care about his body. Well, recently there's this whole thing between Zuckerberg and Elon, so they are kind of competing or whatnot. But like, historically, I think he didn't do that much workouts, if at all. I'm very curious what was his routine, if anything, really. So I think you can ultimately push it through. Like, if you just care about intellect, there is plenty of people who just do that. And I mean, it's actually, that's the stereotypical mental image people have when you see scientists or somebody doing intellectual work, somebody who has their head kind of like on top of their body, but the body is there as a almost like a vehicle to just transport the body from point A to point B. So
yeah. But I would say that I don't know if there are any studies on that, but they may be more prompt to burnouts without physical activities. I don't know. I feel like it's way more healthy to just be overall healthy. But yeah, that's right. That lots of people are prioritizing one or the other, and I feel like both are equally important. I want to say to anyone to go try out ortusbody.ai or on a lot of YouTube channel. Not all of them now, but I believe you are announcing them on your LinkedIn and elsewhere.
Yes.
So.
And on Monday, I'll have many more channels on Monday coming up.
Awesome. And I know you already have Lex Fridman and Huberman. So that's if you, the listener, are not familiar with Huberman, you can definitely use Ortus and just summarize some of his thoughts, because they are really long but super interesting podcasts. And yeah, I definitely recommend using Ortus, but also listening to Huberman. And to that, I would add, I don't know if you've added it to Ortus, but the Tim Ferriss podcast is also pretty useful and interesting, I feel like. Yeah. So that's
I have many channels I'm planning, but like it's we're trying to prioritize the quality as well, and so we're not expanding as much. But we'll definitely Tim Ferriss is on the list definitely, as well as your channel.
Thank you very much, and I'm excited to see that and try that. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for sharing all your insights and your life in general. It was really cool to talk with you, and thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot for the invite, Louis. It was a pleasure.